here with his thoughts on Pope Francis's health situation, as well as analysis of how the Vatican's secret agreement with Communist China could influence the next conclave, is associate editor of The Spectator UK and host of the Holy Smoke podcast, Damian Thompson. Damian, thank you for being here. As we've spoken about numerous times, that Vatican-China secret agreement remains a secret regarding the CCP's input into the appointment of Catholic bishops. It remains troubling. And you commented on a recent Daily Mail article that drew my attention. And the upshot was, given the Pope's health, there are conversations about his successor already happening. And you mentioned the 70-year-old Vatican Secretary of State, Cardinal Pietro Parolin. He's really the custodian of that secret agreement between the Vatican and Communist China. And the Daily Mail calls Parolin a moderate. You would say what?
I'd say, in which universe is he a moderate? Why don't you ask the 10 Chinese bishops who have currently disappeared, we don't know what's happened to them, about whom Cardinal Parolin has said not one word, presumably because he wants to keep his allies in Beijing happy. It's also the reason why the Pope has said not one word about the disgusting persecution of Christians throughout China and the Uyghurs, presumably on the advice of Cardinal Parolin, the Secretary of State, who in addition seems to have adopted some of the imagery, some of the language of sinicization, the dreadful Maoist ideology imposed on the whole of China, but the Catholic Church and Catholic masses, or travesties of masses, that are now officially recognized by Rome. I tweeted something out yesterday. I was disgusted by this Daily Mail article, which yet again gave us the familiar story of a plot by conservative cardinals to frustrate the reforms of Pope Francis. And we had the usual suspects, Austin Ivory and John Allen and a couple of others. It's as if even representatives of mainstream, normally reliable publications, broadsheet, tabloid, online, run immediately to hardline Team Francis propagandists for their interpretation. But on the subject of Cardinal Parolin, he is indeed a front runner. He has been campaigning, and I use that word advisedly, for this job for a very long time. He's been making friends. He's built up an enormous network of allies, about which we don't know an awful lot. We do know that he was in charge of the Secretariat of State during some of the most appalling money laundering and botched investments in the entire history of the Catholic Church. But let me quote the man I regard as, with all due respect to Cardinal Burke, the greatest living cardinal, who was Cardinal Joseph Zen, the 94-year-old former Archbishop of Hong Kong. And Cardinal Zen said in an article in 2020, this about Cardinal Parolin. I read the speech given by Parolin, Secretary of State of His Holiness in Milan on October the 3rd. It was sickening. He is in no way stupid or ignorant. He told a series of lies with open eyes. The most repugnant thing was the insult to the emeritus Pope Benedict XVI by saying that he approved the then agreement signed by the Holy See 2 years ago, which is the same agreement in force now, knowing that Benedict certainly will not come out to deny it. It was very ridiculous and humiliating for the innocent Cardinal Ray being used once more to support the falsehoods of the most eminent secretary. Now, Raymond, when have you heard a leading cardinal, a hero of the church, one of the greatest heroes since Cardinal Mincenti, speak so frankly and with such titanic anger about a man who, to the horror of human rights activists, especially those specializing in China, is being spoken of as papal?
Yeah. No, Cardinal Zen has appeared on this show and said similar things. Here's my question. Do you think Beijing will try to influence this conclave, and have they begun already?
Yes, I think so. But Beijing does not reveal its hand. But we do know that they have tremendous assets, not least in the form of compromat. They've gathered an enormous amount of information about the sexual peccadillos of various cardinals, and knowing Beijing, they will use it. I mean, they've already had tremendous success in their enforcing this vile secret agreement. And by the way, since when were diplomatic agreements in the 21st century secret? But anyway, they've already had such success that a communist apparatchik was able to basically appoint himself Archbishop of Shanghai, the most important Catholic see in China. And the Vatican knew nothing about it. And then Pope Francis had to retrospectively okay it, because it would have been doubly humiliating if he'd tried to, if he'd said that this man could not take the job, given the deal that had been signed. It is the most astonishing and diabolical betrayal of the underground Chinese Catholics who for decades looked to Rome for protection.
Damian, it breaks my heart. Of course, Jimmy Lai, the great freedom fighter, a Catholic convert, languishing in prison and having to endure show trial after show trial to try to clear his name for a crime he really didn't commit. I mean, it was a ridiculous crime being charged. But you see not only bishops, you mentioned them earlier, being vanished in all over mainland China. Those are the ones loyal to traditional church teaching and the papacy. And yet the Vatican is sort of undermining that. And let's be frank, on television, this is really the only spot where these people, our brothers and sisters in China, have been defended, and we've raised our voice about the tragedy, the travesty of their daily lives. And the fact that the Vatican, in lockstep with the regime in China, has allowed this to go on and enabled it is really the greatest scandal, I think, of the last, 12 years?
What greater scandal could there be than the Catholic Church, the Vatican, basically, in alliance with the Communist Party, dragooning faithful Catholics into services in which Jesus Christ is subordinated to the ideology of the Communist Party and the person of the Chinese president. It is an abomination.
Yeah, well, the herding of people into the patriotic association, that's one thing. But then when they begin to pervert the words of the gospel, the words of the Mass, where Xi is the cure to all your problems, Jesus Christ is just kind of a side character. This is a deep perversion of the Word of God, that you're committed to protect the doctrine of faith. The newly named Archbishop of Washington, D.C., Cardinal Robert McElroy, will be installed on March 11th. You recently wrote a column in the Spectator about that appointment. Damian, you're in the UK. What does the appointment of Cardinal McElroy to Washington, D.C., certainly the seat of power in the United States, what does that represent to you?
Revenge for Americans having the temerity to elect President Donald Trump. I think it's specifically revenge for the appointment, I think probably an excellent appointment, of Brian Birch as America's ambassador to the Holy See. And that the Pope should behave in such a petty way is deplorable, but not entirely out of character, I'm afraid.
One more story before we go. Pope Francis and the Vatican's charity office, Caritas, they're calling President Trump's USAID cuts, that's the United States aid, foreign aid, reckless, and that people could be killed, quote, killed, as a result of the interruption of millions of dollars from these grants. Catholic Charities and Catholic Relief Services in the United States have been laying off employees, cutting migrant and refugee resettlement programs in response to those cuts. On February 11th, just days before he entered the Gemelli, Pope Francis established a new commission for the faithful to donate funds directly to the Holy See, the Commission on Donations for the Holy See. Now, Damian, the Vatican already has Peter's Pence for that purpose. Now this new commission is established to raise general funds and also funding for specific projects of the Holy See. Your thoughts on this and the timing of its creation?
Who in their right mind would give a penny to the Holy See? Look what happened to the faithful Catholics who gave to Peter's Pence, members of my family, members of your family, I'm sure. The money was used in recklessly irresponsible financial investments that end up costing the church billions of dollars. What the church bureaucracy needs and won't get, particularly if Parolin is elected, is a doge. And they're terrified of somebody meticulously going through the books and finding out how much money is being wasted. I am not saying that all the money spent on migrants at the American border and other parts of the world is wasted. No, I am not saying that. What I am saying is that just as in the United States, we have no idea how much money is being dribbled away on vanity projects one of which was called the Synod on Synodality, until somebody goes through the books and they are terrified of that happening.
Well, Damian, the last man who went through the books, who was Doge before Doge was cool, was Cardinal George Pell. And we saw what befell him. He found billions of dollars of waste and honey pots all over the place, and he was sent packing.
Indeed, and Libero Maloney, who was the
Yes.
Vatican auditor, was threatened with jail, because there are jail cells in the Vatican, for doing his job. So that gives you an idea of the scale of the crisis.
Yeah, that needs to be cleaned up to rebuild credibility, because we should be able to trust that those funds go to where they're intended. Damian, we'll leave it there. You can find Damian Thompson's commentary at spectator.co.uk. Thank you, Damian.
Thanks, Raymond.